Hello and welcome back to Annie Recapped. Today we'll be going through a cute romantic anime called Tonikawa Over the Moon for you. Before we begin, please subscribe to our channel to keep up to date with the best animes worldwide. Now let's get right into it. The anime begins with Nasa Yuzaki lying on a snowy floor covered in blood as he feels his life drifting away from him. Just then he hears a voice assuring him that he will live if he just hangs in there, and that voice belongs to his wife named Tsukasa Yuzaki. Nasa has developed an overconfident personality because of the birth name he has been given by his parents. Aiming to get into a prestigious school, he was on his way home when he notices a beautiful girl across the street and tries to approach her when suddenly gets hit by a truck. Even though Tsukasa got injured as well, saving him, she quickly leaves after telling the driver to call for an ambulance. Nasa feels as if it's his last chance to get a hold of her, and he can't let this opportunity go to waste and might not see her ever again. So he fastens up on his feet to chase after her. Tsukasa is surprised to see him in his current state, well, so are we, and wipes his bloody face for him, explaining that his legs are broken and he will soon lose consciousness. But Nasa keeps his act together and runs after her once more. This time, he confesses his love and asks her out. To which Tsukasa says that it's only possible if he marries her. Nasa immediately agrees and passes out right after. When he comes to realize that he has to waste a whole year because of rehab, and even though he passed the entry test for high school with top grades, he didn't enroll in any and instead took some jobs in hopes to find Tsukasa. He moves out of his parents' house to live alone just so they don't worry about him. Just when Nasa lost all hope to see Tsukasa again, she appears at his doorstep and introduces herself. Nasa is completely bewildered by the fact that the girl he was searching so hard for is currently in his apartment. Tsukasa hands Nasa a marriage registration form and then tells him what she meant by marrying her. Even though he doesn't understand the depth of the situation, he still signs the form without hesitation. Without waiting for the morning, they went to turn in their form and legal documents to the marriage registration office, and just like that, they are officially married to each other. Nasa couldn't believe that he is now a married man, but when he touches Tsukasa's hand for the first time, he couldn't get over the feel of it. It feels like the best feeling he had ever felt in his entire life, and just like that, two strangers are somehow united by a beautiful bond of marriage. Now that the two of them are officially married, it suddenly dawns upon Nasa that being married means that they are going to live together, and the first problem he sees is the lack of space to sleep. Since his bed is semi-single, it doesn't have enough space for two people unless they agree to sleep while cuddling, which may be a problem, of course. Just when Nasa was going through all the possible options, Tsukasa catches him in action and throws a bucket of cold water over his fantasies by saying that she's not yet comfortable with it. Tsukasa went to pick up her luggage, which probably means that she was going to stay the night, but since Nasa only has one bed and they can't sleep together yet, she decides to sleep at a capsule hotel, which didn't make Nasa feel so good. Just when she was about to leave, Nasa stops her and requests her to stay the night at his place, fearing that she might disappear again if he lets her go. Taking the offer, Tsukasa demands to buy the most expensive futon, and just like that, they end up at a store to purchase futons, literally in the middle of the night. They flirt a little while shopping, and the wife eventually finds the futon of her liking. She gives it a test run upon reaching home and is satisfied with the purchase. Just before turning in, Tsukasa realizes that there is still some necessary stuff that she needs, so the both of them end up taking a tour of the convenience store as well. Nasa can't believe that the girl he loves is actually in his house and is changing in the next room. The moment he lays his eyes on his beautiful wife, his heart skips a beat. Tsukasa thanks him for everything he has done for her, and after all this heart-stirring moment, they finally turn in. Nasa couldn't get his heart under control, thinking that a girl is sleeping right next to his bed. While staring at her, he realizes that Tsukasa is a restless sleeper. She moves around a lot while sleeping. He tucks her in again and wonders if he should sneak a little goodnight kiss, but drops the idea, thinking that their first time should be when they both are awake. At that very moment, Tsukasa gets up in her sleep to get some water, but she doesn't go back to her bed right away. She stands in front of Nasa's bed and flops over him, taking his blanket away. Poor Nasa didn't dare take back the blanket the whole night. Tsukasa wakes up in confusion and starts taking off her clothes, but Nasa stops her in time and goes to another room. Since Nasa ends up calling Tsukasa Mrs. Yuzaki, she demands to give him a name too. While doing that, Nasa calls her Tsukasa Babe, making her red like a tomato. It will probably make some time for her to adjust to the new name and life as a married couple. It's their first morning together, and it's time for breakfast. Nasa is completely blown away to see Tsukasa in an apron. She prepares breakfast and gets surprised to see all the ingredients stacking up in the fridge. Turns out that Nasa likes to eat a balanced diet that has all the basic nutrients, but what he eats is barely cooked food, so Tsukasa decides to make him a real Japanese breakfast. Upon tasting the food she made, Nasa went almost straight to heaven. After breakfast, they both went to the bathhouse Nasa mentioned earlier, where they met Kaname Arisugawa. They went to the same middle school, and she is the bathhouse owner's young daughter. She likes to pull pervy jokes and likes making Nasa embarrassed. Nasa introduces Tsukasa to her as his wife, making Kaname's shaken up to the core. She congratulates them anyway, and gives Tsukasa a free pass as a gift. She asks Nasa about things like the wedding and rings, but Nasa had none of it. Her claims make him fired up, and he promises to give Tsukasa all the happiness in the world. Tsukasa ends up hearing all his screaming and gets embarrassed. Later on, in the men's section, Nasa is wondering about the scenes that they show in Bathhouse episodes on anime, when Kaname catches him naked and teases him with her pervy jokes. On the other hand, the women's section is empty, and Tsukasa feels incredibly pleased with the silence. But soon after, a girl named Aya Arisugawa keeps apologizing to Tsukasa for sneaking a peek at her. She's the eldest daughter of the bathhouse owner. Even though Tsukasa did not mind the peeking part that much, but still, Aya insists on rubbing her back as an apology. In the middle of watching Tsukasa's back, they both introduce themselves. But hearing Tsukasa's new last name, Aya mistook her for Nasa's young sister, and Tsukasa somehow did not bother to correct her. Nasa gets burned up in the bath, and when he comes out, Tsukasa was standing next to him. Aya comes in to greet Nasa, and there Tsukasa comes to find that they both were in the same class in middle school, and how Nasa helped him in their difficult times. At the end of the conversation, Aya ends up calling Nasa My Nasa, which is a nickname that Tsukasa uses for him. On their way back, Tsukasa asks Nasa about Aya being cute, to which he foolishly agrees, and ends up adding more details like fuel to the fire. He feels the vibe around her change, and mistakenly thinks it's because of the wedding nearby. So he hands her the apartment keys and asks her to wait for him. He went on his own to make arrangements for the proposal, leaving his wife in total confusion. After Nasa runs off, Tsukasa is forced to go home alone and wait for his return. She feels lonely, so she tries to look around the house to do stuff, but the house is awfully clean and she doesn't want to find any forbidden stuff of Nasa, so she decides to do cooking instead. Just then, the door knocks, and it's Chitose Kagenoji instead of Nasa. She's Tsukasa's sister and is here to pick her up, but Tsukasa stops her before Chitose tries to play cute any further and tells her that she is now married and will come home and tell everyone when the time is right. Defeated, Chitose was crying on the stairs when Nasa came along. He tries to console Chitose and listen to her story sincerely. He was about to tell her about the proposal when Tsukasa comes out after hearing Nasa's voice, and Chitose comes to meet the very husband of her sister, who she hates. Chitose tries everything to insult and reject Nasa as Tsukasa's husband, but since Nasa contains uncanny social service abilities, he was able to take her on pretty efficiently, but still ends up getting kidnapped by Chitose anyways. She takes him to the mansion where Tsukasa used to live and orders her maids, Charlotte and Aurora, to take some tablet photos of him so she can show them to Tsukasa and break their marriage. But while they put on the commotion, Nasa escapes and stumbles upon a room which smells exactly like Tsukasa. There he finds a moon rock that probably only Nasa poses. While Nasa was admiring the rock, Charlotte busts into the room with a huge sword and starts swinging it wildly. She ends up cracking the frame the rock was in, leaking all the gas inside. Nasa acts quickly and fixes the cracked frame. Charlotte hugs him as thanks, and Aurora takes the opportunity to take the photos and edit them in a flash to make them look like cheating evidence photos. Tsukasa comes in and sees the photo. She puts up an act of getting mad at Nasa and makes an escape with him just like that. She takes him through a secret passage that leads to an abandoned church. Tsukasa tells him that it's one of the places she wanted to show him, and there, Nasa decides to execute the planned proposal and kisses Tsukasa, promising to never leave her side. Another day begins with new challenges awaiting this unusual couple. Tsukasa comes to realize that there is no TV in the apartment and that Nasa doesn't know anything about movies. She explains the depth of movies and directory style with a bunch of popular titles that one must watch at all costs. She wants to share the moments and discuss the movies together with him, making Nasa realize how much Tsukasa loves movies. So for her sake, they went to buy a new TV. Tsukasa is incredibly practical and only wants a cheaper TV that works okay. Nasa was telling Kaname about his proposal when she asks about the wedding rings. Nasa thinks that they are unnecessary and that Tsukasa probably doesn't need them, so he ends up getting lectured by a 14-year-old because he doesn't know the basics about women. On their way home, Nasa informs her that he has to go to work today, which makes her a little lonely and sad. In the park, they sit together quietly, while Charlotte and Aurora spy on them from a distance. Nasa feels that Tsukasa is a little down about him leaving her home alone, so he leans in for a kiss to comfort her. But they both got pretty embarrassed afterwards. Nasa couldn't stop thinking about Tsukasa even at work. Looking at his hand, he finally realizes the true purpose of wedding rings, and from then on, he is determined to get one for Tsukasa. During dinner, he asks her about getting an engagement ring that will symbolize their true love for eternity. But Tsukasa, being a domestic wife, thinks that it's a waste of money since they are already past the point of engagement. Then she explains him the difference between the wedding ring and the engagement ring, since he is clearly mistaken about the two. Either way, Nasa insists on getting a pair of diamond wedding rings, so Tsukasa agrees to know that he won't back down easily. She takes him to the fanciest jewelry store so he would back down after seeing the price. But she ends up dragging him out because of his stubbornness instead. Giving in to his persistence, she takes him to a cheaper store, but she still thinks that it's too much of a waste. While sulking, Nasa expresses how he thinks that rings can be something that reminds them of each other even when they're not together. Hearing that, Tsukasa kisses him on the cheek and finally agrees to get the cheapest pair, which isn't so cheap anyway. But since it has a deeper meaning behind it, it reminds her of how much Nasa loves her, and that's why she can put up with the price. As mentioned before, Tsukasa is a restless sleeper and gets up in the middle of the night to get water and steals Nasa's covers, but today is a little unusual. Instead of stealing his cover, she laid beside him using his arms as a pillow. Nasa thought carefully about hugging her while she sleeps and decides to follow through. He wrapped his arms around her and felt her warmth at that moment. Tsukasa turns to face him and kisses him in her sleep. After melting Nasa's brain, she falls asleep on her futon again. In the morning, all Nasa could think about is getting a new bed so they could sleep together, and come to the conclusion that they should get a new place with more space altogether. His fantasies are built around having a proper bathroom and a couch to have romantic movie nights on. He excitedly went to ask Tsukasa what she thinks, but she rejects the idea, saying that the small place makes her feel closer to him. When he discusses it with Kaname, she vouches for it. She even gives a new idea of sleeping while holding hands. After hearing that, Nasa is more determined to convince her of a new place. When he gets home, he accidentally sees Tsukasa changing clothes. He makes this incident a point for getting a new place. Nasa plays his trump card by telling her that they can have a projector and have a theater-like experience at home, and not just that, they can make a full library for movies and manga for her. These points were enough to change Tsukasa's mind and have her agree. During their conversation about the guarantor, Nasa realizes that he still hasn't told his parents about his marriage, so he decides to call them as soon as they get home. Nasa's mom texts him while they were at the unusual park. She exposes his scheme in front of him and demands that he comes home the next week with his new wife, and Tsukasa thinks the same, that they should visit them as soon as they can. And since they need to go a long way from Tokyo to Nara, this could be considered their honeymoon. Tsukasa asks for a camera before they go on the trip so she can capture as many memories of her new life as she could. Nasa tries taking a picture of Tsukasa and gets obsessed with it. He ends up taking millions of pictures of her without getting tired. On the other hand, Tsukasa takes just one weird picture of him and keeps it as a memory. Next, they went to the night bus station and got on their journey while Chitose followed them behind. Tsukasa is excited about the trip and falls asleep soon after the bus starts moving, but Nasa couldn't get a wink on the rock-hard seats, so he hopes that Tsukasa leans on him at least while she sleeps, and one bump on the road grants his wish. At the bus stop, Nasa was completely bent because of sitting in the same position for so long, but he gets his act together quickly to not make her feel that it's her fault. Charlotte and Aurora, spying from the bushes, admire the couple and think it's cruel to break them apart, but Chitose sticks to her words until the very end, and she's gonna do whatever it takes. Well, that's it for today. Hope we enjoyed this cute little romance between Nasa and Tsukasa, but there is more coming up because they're on their way to meet Nasa's parents, so buckle up and stay tuned. Until then, please leave us a like and subscribe to the channel to keep up to date. Peace.